Hello and welcome to Library Land Conversations. I'm Greg Peverill-Conti, the Executive Director of the Library Land Project. We started these conversations back when libraries were closed and visits were few and far between. Now, they've become one of our favorite things to do in Library Land. It's a great way for us to keep in touch with people who are doing interesting things in public, academic, school libraries, and to share those stories.
Thanks, Greg. I'm Adam Zahn, president of the Library Land Project. Today's episode is going to introduce an association of libraries and also a mapping project that caught our attention. We're going to learn about the Association of Jewish Libraries. They are the leading authority of Judaic librarianship. We're joined today by Neil Frau-Cortes, who's the chair of the RAS Cataloging Committee at the AJL, and Yahm Reichart, who worked on a mapping project for their website.
Thank you both for joining us. Adam and I are big map fans. One of the things that actually we did when we first started Library Land was to create a map of all the public libraries in Massachusetts. Yahm, you and I I first learned of this mapping project when you shared it with our cohort at the University of Alabama, and I was so glad that you did. Neil, I was wondering if you could start maybe by sharing an overview of the AJL, its mission, who it serves, where it's based, basic information along those lines.
Well, the AJL, as you said, is an international professional association that intends to foster access to information for anything Jewish in any media. It promotes Jewish literacy and tries to be a gathering and bringing together of both what would be the academic and research libraries, but also the public libraries, even the synagogue libraries. So it's very eclectic in its goals.
How long has the organization been around?
30 years, so I didn't want to say it wrong. The association per se was founded in 1966 as the Association of Jewish Libraries, but it was preceded by two different branches, two different associations. The Jewish Librarians Association, that was founded in 1946, and the Jewish Library Association from 1962. The first one dealt with research, academic libraries. The second one worked mostly with synagogue, school, and community center libraries. As a result, our association right now has these two branches that coexist, of course, but they sort of have specialized and specific programs for the research academic and for the synagogue, school, etc.
That's really helpful. Neil, how about when did you first become associated with the Association of Jewish Libraries, and what are you doing on the committee that we mentioned?
I think it was probably some 8 years ago, and I was interested. Originally I'm a Hebrew language cataloger, and I was working for the University of Maryland at that point. And one important task of this association is also the cataloging committee, which sets practice and sets policies and stuff like that for Hebrew cataloging in the US and beyond. So I first joined that. There are also chapters in different cities. There's a chapter in DC where I was. And what I do right now, I am the chair of the cataloging catalog. of the cataloging committee, but I am also the chair / coordinator of the map directory task force.
Excellent. We're going to have some other questions about the map, but we're going to get there because that's certainly something that is pretty interesting to us. Now, how did you come across the committee? How did you come across the project? How did you get involved with this? And was this a first for you, or have you done other geospatial projects in the past?
So I'm new to librarianship and like creating maps and pretty much everything. So when I was getting my first master's degree from the University of Alabama, because I was researching Israelis that live in Birmingham, I got really involved with the Association of Jewish Studies, the Association of Israel Studies, and when I decided not to get a PhD and to become a professor and instead become a librarian, one of the first things I did was I looked for professional organizations, and I was so excited when I found the Association of Jewish Libraries. So I think pretty much as soon as I got accepted into the program, I signed up to be a member and joined the listserv, because I was like, things will come up and I will meet people, and because I was like, I have zero library experience, so I need to do something to, get involved and meet people at least. And then one day, Neil sent a message on the listserv that he was looking for an intern. And I was like, well, I don't really know how to do all the things that he is looking for, but I'm really passionate and excited, and I know how to Google things. And the University of Alabama has a lot of resources, so I might, we'll see what happens. And I applied, and Neil was like, all right, you're hired. So
that's awesome. So was the map already a concept at that point, or did it come about later on? And I guess getting a little deeper into the map, who do you think it's intended for, and how do you envision it being used?
Neil, do you want to answer that, or should I?
I'll tell the story before the map started, and then you can take from there. So at one point, it was the origin of it. It was a directory of members of the Association of Jewish Libraries. So the members can be either people, or in many cases, the institutions where they work, libraries and archives and whatever. Once we had the directory, it was very static and very non-exciting. So we thought it would be really great if we can make a visualization in a map. And here comes Yahm, who has done an excellent job with it.
Yeah, so when I started the internship, I was first tasked with finding some sort of visualization tool. And for me, it was really important to make sure that it was visually accessible to screen readers. And in my mind, I'm really big on color-coded things. Almost everything in my home is color-coded, like my files and things. But I thought about it. I was like, well, but some people are colorblind, so that doesn't really make sense. So I was thinking about different ways to create a visualization that is both practical to use, but also visually accessible. And so I actually reached out to Dr. Ann McDivitt, who works at the Digital Humanities Lab at the University of Alabama. And we had a long conversation about what I was looking for and what kind of tools to use. And so she gave some suggestions. And then we actually decided to use Google My Maps because that was the most it was the one that made the most sense. There was also story maps, which is so beautiful to use, but it doesn't really make sense if you're not building a story. You just want to show a map of points. I don't remember your other questions.
Well, yeah, who do you think the intended users are?
Oh, so in my mind, the map is a really great way to, first off, see the different types of Jewish libraries that are available, because I had no idea, because even though I'm Jewish, I grew up very secular and I don't go to synagogues, and I was like, oh my gosh, synagogues have libraries. Obviously, of course they have libraries, but I never thought about it. And there's all kinds of research institutions, and Jewish day schools have libraries, and it's amazing to see how many different types of libraries there are, and the different, when you click on entries, you can see different classification systems that they use, and that's really interesting too, just as a general survey, I think. But I think also for people to learn about different Jewish libraries, for different types of librarians to reach each other, for baby librarians such as myself who maybe want to volunteer or work at a local Jewish library. Like they could be like, oh my gosh, there's a library, this Jewish library down the street from me. I should go talk to them. And to promote research, because there's so many different resources that are out there that still need to be explored and written about and preserved and archived.
Yeah, I totally agree. I just wanted to add to it that what started as mostly a visualization of only the members of the association is growing from there. I think that our interest, like Yahm said, is like anybody in a particular city could actually check the map and say what libraries and what collections are available in my area, and make connections and further literacy and research. We are trying to add as much information as we can, and we are in touch with at least another couple projects. They have gathered information on archives and on Jewish archives, etc.
I was going to ask about challenges, and there were two that came to mind. One is, how are you sourcing the data? Because this directory didn't exist before, and there must be hundreds, if not thousands, of Jewish libraries of one sort or another around the world. And then that international piece, how do you normalize the data? I mean, I've worked with Google My Maps, and it drives me crazy that, Sheets and Excel doesn't recognize zip codes that start with 0. They treat them as numbers. How did you deal with getting the data and then normalizing it so that you could use it effectively?
Well, we are reliant on crowdsourcing. I'm sorry, my pet just knocked something down. Sorry, that was distracting. She's a snake who crawls around the house, and so she gets into trouble. Sorry. Okay. So we are reliant on crowdsourced materials, and so it's a little tricky because there's only so many times you could tell people, hey, don't ignore this email, please fill out our survey, and then we'll be in touch about next steps. My plan for the future is to be a little more, because I'm staying on this project, like beyond the original plan of just building a map. So I want to be more proactive about reaching out to libraries, and hopefully that will help populate the map some more.
And then how do you deal with that issue of normalizing data? If you're getting it from crowdsourcing, I've certainly heard stories about crowdsourced taxonomies that get very crazy very quickly. How are you making sure that the data you get, A, is accurate, and then is easily absorbed by Google? in its map format?
So we have a survey that people fill out, and then I take that information and I manually put it into Google My Maps. And so I usually cross-check what gets filled in with what I can find by doing a quick Google search and adding information. And then every person, whoever fills out the entry, they have to approve that the information is correct and accurate. And we have to receive permission from the library director that they're okay with this information going public. And so far, so good.
I mean, why wouldn't it be good?
Yeah.
How does the map build on and support the larger organizational mission?
I'll let you take that one, Neil.
Yeah. Well, I think that they are one and the same. As I say, it started more as a directory map, a directory of members. But the idea is that it lines up perfectly with the goals of the association. What we want as Association of Jewish Libraries is that the libraries that have Hebrew and Judaic materials get known by the public at large and by the people, the researchers, and whatever. So whatever tools we can put in order to facilitate this contact between the user that looks for information and the library itself helps. So the map is just another of our tools. Our aim is to make connections and to increase Jewish literacy, and we try to be as granular as possible, including, I don't know, links to the library catalog if it's available, some succinct description of the collections that are available, etc.
That's great. I was also interested in how the association functions in those regards. We're sort of experienced with Interlibrary Loan. Has there been any attempt by the association to coordinate resource sharing and collaboration amongst those member institutions?
Not in terms of Interlibrary Loan, for instance. We create network and we have our events throughout the year and the workshops and circles and many other things, conference, of course. But it's in continuous evolution. And I think that, interestingly enough, the big challenge of the year of the pandemic / Black Pest that we are going through, although it has forced us to have two annual conferences in a row, totally virtual, in a way it has also built a number of bridges and has helped people to get to lose the fear of participating in online events. So our online event agenda is pretty robust, and I think we are creating network, and groups of interest are kind of emerging here and there.
It's really encouraging to hear that that's what's taking place. We're interested in the collaboration piece, and we saw that you've had some experience collaborating with the Library of Congress. We are huge fans of the Library of Congress and are curious just about how that collaboration went and how collaboration works with large institutions that you might be, that might have resources that you want to include in the directory.
Usually, okay, so it is true we're collaborating with the Library of Congress and also with the National Library of Israel, because those are like the two major entities worldwide that support Jewish librarianship and Hebrew language librarianship in particular. There are a number of ways we do this. I'll give you the example of the cataloging committee. We have representatives from these institutions as members of the committee in rotation. So every 2 or 4 years, the person ends his term. We aim at replacing the LC or the National Library of Israel person with another from the same institution. At our conferences, for instance, there is always a long, detailed session for each one of the national libraries to make their presentation, to update us on what's going on Jewish Hebrew wives in their institutions, what new policies or changes are happening in a wide variety of fields. You hear either from, I don't know, cataloging rules to new collections that are interesting, or projects of digital humanities, whatever they can. They feel that they have to share. As for other bigger institutions like some universities, there are our members. It is pretty similar. Maybe it's a little less formal. Usually it is a particular representative of that university that belongs to the association and brings in whatever collaboration opportunities we can master.
Well, that's helpful. We read your bios and backgrounds, and I know the mapping and even the committee is just one of many projects you're involved with. Would both of you or one of you like to share what else you're working on?
You go first, yeah.
Oh, okay. So I'm in my second year, and for the Master's in Library and Information Studies program, hoping to graduate in May of next year. So I'm also involved with a project headed by Dr. Daniel Levine at the University of Alabama. He is building an archive of defunct religious institutions in the state of Alabama, and he's beginning with the Jewish community, especially because there's a lot of because when people think of the Southeast, they usually think, well, everybody's like a Baptist or a Methodist, but actually it's a lot more heterogeneous than that, and there's a lot of pockets of different religious communities, and so because he's Jewish and involved in the Jewish community in Birmingham and Tuscaloosa, so he's starting there, and there's synagogues that like just have there's just boxes of cultural artifacts and materials that are just sitting in people's basements or attics or garages or whatever, and so the goal is to build an archive to kind of challenge the assumptions about faith and communities in the Southeast. So I'm helping him with that, but it's at the very, very beginning stages. So like,
well, that'll go beyond Alabama. I mean, I know there's, you mentioned Birmingham, but Savannah, Georgia, New Orleans, there's some really interesting history of the Southern Jewry.
Oh yeah, I think the goal is to begin in Alabama, just so that you have more of a localized effort and not to be too overwhelmed with things. And then I think he wants to collaborate with like the institution, I always forget, the Institution of Southern Jewish Life. I think that's the full name, in New Orleans. And there's a new Jewish museum that opened up in Augusta recently. So there's a lot of collaboration that I think he's planning on, but this archive is more intended to be an academic archive, to because he's part of the religious studies program and political science on campus. So he's looking at more of as like a community archive that serves the purpose of academia, broadly speaking.
That's great. How about you, Neil? Do you want to share some of the other things you're looking at?
Yes, right now I'm working for the University of Maryland as the head of metadata creation and enhancement and cataloging. Although I'm transitioning to a new position at the Broward County Public Library as of Monday. So, yes, nervous. On the other hand, I am a translator. I specialize in medieval Hebrew texts, and I am a researcher mostly on the Jews of the Crown of Aragon in the late Middle Ages, and on the history of Kabbalah.
Excellent, excellent. I have two last questions. Actually, it's more than that, but one is, you both talked about this specific project, and I would like to hear each of you say just what it is that really excites you about the work that you're doing on this. And then we have a question about, favorite library memories. We always want to hear that from folks, but what is it that when you sit down to work on this gets you really jazzed?
You go first, Neil.
Okay. I think this, as a librarian and more concretely as a metadata librarian with a kind of a fetish for digital libraries and digital humanities in general, I love data, and I love how data can paint pictures and really help people figure out realities that a cold spreadsheet cannot do. And in the map, regarding the map in particular, I think that it is exciting to see that people get interested and that we discover there are so many interesting collections that may be down the corner, but it may be like totally unknown. You didn't even know that this particular synagogue that you drive by has an archive on a writer that you are interested in. So I like these sudden connections and discoveries.
I think I'm going to echo a lot of that. It's amazing to see so many libraries, because like I said, it never occurred to me that synagogues would have libraries, even though it makes so much sense. And it's really fascinating. And I think it's also maybe because I lived in Alabama for 4 years and being so aware of how much of I felt like I was a minority because, there's only so many Jews in the South. But all of a sudden I was like, oh, look, there's all these people like everywhere that I could talk to about Jewy things. And it's very comforting to know. So I think also as when I started the MLIS program, I was going to get into reference, but then doing this project and also taking some technical library services classes, I'm like, oh yes, technical services is where I want to live. So it's just kind of reinforced like a love for all the technical things of librarianship.
I'm with you. I have digital libraries in just a few hours.
Right. Yeah, we both do. Yeah.
And in metadata, it's like it's super interesting stuff to be learning about and playing with. Now, what are a couple of favorite libraries that you have memories of that you'd like to share?
Go ahead, Neil. Go ahead.
This thing about the Zoom, you don't really know you don't really see so much of the body language. It's like, okay, I'm going to talk. So I have very fond memories of a library I grew up with in my hometown in Palma, in Mallorca, Balearic Islands. It was a public library that had most of the storage apart, so you couldn't access the shelves yourself. You have to page a particular book you were interested in. But it's a considerably big library, and it contained a number of texts in Hebrew, not super abundant, but for me it was like this major discovery. And then I think my second favorite library that really marked my career and my way of seeing things was the one at the Central Library of the University of Barcelona, which is a very old institution founded, I don't know, in the 14th century or something like that. And it is just beautiful. It sits in this very classical kind of building. Yeah, it is a very dear to me, dear to my heart.
And I think for me, I grew up in Los Angeles, and I went to the LA Public Library in the San Fernando Valley. And I didn't really like going to the library because it was so quiet, and it felt, I don't know, it felt a little, I don't know, it was just too quiet and stuffy, I think, just all around. But then I studied for a year at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem, and when I went to their main humanities library, I was so just shocked by the first floor, because it was very much the kind of like libraries that you find in a lot of universities now. But I was really surprised by this when I first saw there's like couches everywhere. There's a room where you could take a nap. There's all these tables where you and little stalls where you could like little cubbies where you could hide and do your work, or you can sit on a couch with your friends and do work. And I was like, oh, libraries are like evolving from these quiet, musty buildings. Like, I mean, not that that's not wonderful, but like it made me anxious as a child. So, and then, so that was really lovely. And then when I visited Berlin, I found there's an incredible lesbian archive in Berlin. It's the largest lesbian archive in Europe for sure, if not the world. And they just have everything. And I just went there on a whim, and I was talking to the archivist before I even realized like what an archivist was. And it was amazing. And I think when I thought about going into librarianship, I thought of that, of like those two memories. And I was like, oh, like the possibilities of librarianship are so much bigger than I think what you assume unless you're in the world of librarianship. So
Absolutely. I mean, when we started going to libraries, we were using them as a place to work, and we just imagined, oh, they're quiet places. And so quickly we were like, wow, like libraries are really something else. And that's what we want to tell people about, is they're not quiet buildings anymore, friends. They're awesome and dynamic places.
Those were all amazing. I'm glad you both shared those. And yeah, I wonder, Yam, if that one of your youth is quiet anymore. You know, I'm sure they've changed as well. So
You froze for a minute there, Adam. I wasn't able to hear what you said.
I'll try again. So I was asking if people want to get in touch with Neil and Yam online, how they do that, and also how people get in touch with the organization and find the organization online.
As for the organization, the website is jewishlibraries.org, one single word, jewishlibraries.org. And as for the map, Yam?
Yeah, it's under, if you go to the AJL website, so jewishlibraries.org, and you look under the About AJL tab, it'll be under Mapping AJL, or you can email me at ajldirectorycommittee@gmail.com.
All right. Well, it has been an absolute pleasure to hear about this project and to hear you all talk about things that I think a lot of people didn't realize there was such a wealth of information in these archives around the world. And it's great that you're uncovering that and making it more accessible. We have more of these interviews in store. We have plenty coming up, and we're really excited about them. If you have ideas for topics or guests or have questions for us, you can write to us at info@librarylandproject.org. You can find these podcasts wherever you find your favorite podcasts. And until next time, we'll see you in Libraryland. Thank you.
Libraryland.